Spotted Sundown.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be a remarkable horror thriller, and I've not seen it yet, and I can't get my hands on a copy, so I'm looking to see if they're going to be playing them on any of these, like second-rate movie theaters, or see if you can find it somewhere like on eBay. I really would like to see it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking this will be on my YouTube channel, but I don't know if I'm going to leave it up. Because for me, at least for now, I think I want to do pretty much strictly audio.
Yeah, I have a face for radio.
So do I, especially when I haven't shaved in like 2 months.
I can't grow a beard. I tried.
Well, I have like the ultimate bloodline. I'm like part Jewish and part Dutch Amish. So
Don't you know?
yeah. So I'm all over. Okay. I'm gonna after each segment I'll probably just restart and introduce you again and everything. So
Cool.
So I'm just gonna start out, but we're not gonna do the Willow Creek talk first. We can save that for later. I want to talk about Bigfoot stuff.
Bigfoot.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna do like 3, 2, 1, and then count us in, and then I'll just start the show. Also, like this is super laid back. When I was coming up with the idea for it, I really wanted it to be just quick little conversations, rather than like some sort of mapped out, very put together show.
Those are always the best.
Yeah, I should probably get rid of this cough drop that I have.
I don't know. I just swallowed an ice cube, so we're kind of in the same. That was exciting.
You weren't on Beyond the Edge this week.
No, I quit.
Really?
Yeah, I left.
All right.
I needed my space. I don't know. I don't know how to say it nicely. I just kind of outgrew it. I don't know. I'm kind of bittersweet about the whole thing right now.
I'm sorry to hear that. You were one of the main reasons I checked it out.
Well, I'm glad somebody liked it. I just wasn't getting enough airtime, I felt, anymore. And I was having. I came back a couple years ago. Eric asked me to come back to bring some humor and some different direction to the show, and I came back and did my piece, but I just never found my place again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of uncomfortable for me to sit there and listen when I'm used to kind of directing and pushing us in directions.
Yeah.
And Lon is just so full of information that it was like unfair to cut him off, to interrupt, because he just has so much knowledge and all this stuff. It's just, the listeners wanted the information. I think they wanted information. They wanted to be entertained, but that kind of show, depending on the guest, was really hard to balance. And sometimes our guests just sucked.
Yeah. You'll have that with anything. I mean, we haven't done a ton of like guest episodes on ancillary characters, but I had one, and I'm not going to say it because I'm live right now, and with my luck, somehow this would get out. But I had one girl who she's one of my favorite like indie comic creators, but I had put together this whole interview with her like way in advance, and I was so pumped up. And we got into this interview, and I had probably 20 or 30 questions. We were through all my questions in about 10 minutes, and
That sucks.
I know, and I'm just like trying to drag, and I've done freelance journalism for like 4 or 5 years. Well, actually, like 6 years now. So, like questioning people, I'm good at it, typically, but apparently not. Apparently not in this case.
Sometimes you just get Smokey Crabtree. And I'll throw the name out there if people are listening, because I love Smokey. I have nothing against Smokey Crabtree.
Yeah.
Worst interview I've ever did in my life. Everything always went back to, well, it's in my book. Well, I understand it's in your book, but we want to talk about your book, so maybe
Yeah.
you could sell some. Wink. And it just didn't go anywhere. In fact, if you listen to that episode of the SasWhat experience, we're at James Baker's place doing it. We're in his office. You can literally hear me banging my head off the wall because I'm just at a roadblock and I can't get anywhere with it. Like, you can hear the thud, thud, thud of me just smacking my head like, just let's get this hour over with.
I don't know if I've listened to that one. I thought I'd listened to almost everything.
I don't know if that one ever made it to can. I really think it might have been deleted.
Let's get, you know what? We're probably going to end up using some of this if you don't mind.
I don't care. Use it
Okay.
all.
Jeez, can you hear that?
What is that?
That was apparently a motorcycle or a helicopter.
Yes, because they have to be that loud, They
Right.
don't have a choice.
Right. They can't help it.
They don't have mufflers or anything that you can. You know, people actually buy mufflers to make their vehicles sound louder.
Yeah, those are the people that I hate.
Me too.
My wife always makes fun of me because we'll be sitting at like a stoplight and some guy on a hog will pull up beside me. I always put the windows up and just get so frustrated, run them off the road, drive them over a few times.
Well, I can't stand it myself. I like to drive. I like to listen to my music. I don't like to listen to other vehicles and mufflers.
Exactly.
I don't like the smell of exhaust, and I don't like the smell of other people's vehicle fumes. So it kind of ticks me off. I'm with you. If I could literally commit vehicular homicide against some of these people and get away with it, I would do it. Not that I advocate it for people out there. In the moment, if I could get away with it, I probably would have done it like 25 times in this past weekend.
Every day. This is SasWhat, the podcast of my blog, which is called SasWhat. And tonight I'm joined by Sean Forker. You may know him from such prior accomplishments as the Sasquatch Experience and Beyond the Edge, as well as he had a major part in... What's the name of the organization you helped start? Because I know there's at least one.
I'm the director of the Keystone Bigfoot Project, which is kind of my baby right now. I helped form the original American Bigfoot Society, which is now it's a different organization with the same name. Melissa Hovey runs it, who,
Okay.
is a good friend of mine. I don't want anybody to take that as a negative because it's not, because some people will. And there's BigfootResearch.com, which is the Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers. I'm on their board of directors, the PA Bigfoot Society, of course, which I play a big hand in now. But I do a lot. I'm really, not at the moment, but I was quite active in Bigfoot research. The last couple of months have been kind of dry for me here. We've been conferencing out. We're just like conferenced out.
Oh, okay.
April, May has I must have put 1,200 miles on my vehicle just going back and forth to Ohio. For the different conferences, which were good times. You were at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. We got the interface there for like 10 minutes because that was a wild place.
That was nuts.
Most people I've seen at a Bigfoot conference. Now, before that, the biggest gate I remember being a part of at a Bigfoot conference was the 2008 East Coast Bigfoot Conference. There were like 600 and some people that attended that. This last Ohio Bigfoot Conference that we were at kind of blew it away. I don't know how many actual people attended, but I remember Friday going into the lodge, like talking to Craig Woolheater, worried that the place was going to collapse because there were so many people.
Yeah, from what Mark has said, the lodge claimed there were 3,000 people that were involved with the conference in some way. I know
Huge.
When it comes to attendees, it was like 700.
I mean, you got to look at what the catalyst for that was. That's finding Bigfoot's been really popular, and regardless what anybody thinks of the shows, it gets people interested into what we do. Maybe gives us gives them a better understanding of what we do, good or bad, and it brings people to these conferences. And some people made some money off that, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Really
Talk to me about the Alliance for what is it? The Alliance for Independent Bigfoot Researchers.
The Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers is kind of like. When it originally started off, it was supposed to be BFRO 2.0, and I don't think it really got to the level of hype that it wanted to. It's really spread out across the country of independent researchers, kind of gives us an umbrella to network under, and there's scientific applications behind it, perhaps to get people into some grants, and actually put some legitimacy back into a field that I think really needs it, and I hate using that term because it really sounds snobbish, but I guess at some point I am because I've been doing this a lot longer. Don't let this angelic face fool you, folks. I've been doing this a lot longer than most people have been in it, and we are really starting to see an influx of interest in the field because of these television shows. And again, that's not a bad thing. But I think what a lot of the researchers today lack is that mentorship from some of the people that have been in this from way back, which I've been fortunate to have a decent set of mentors that still kind of guide me and keep my head on straight. And the Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers is kind of on that point to network with established researchers, kind of get us a scientific background. And at the same time, get people to agree to a set amount of principles. I guess, that's kind of where you go to the no-kill, pro-kill. This is a no-kill organization. I myself am a no-kill guy personally. I'm not going to bag one. doesn't necessarily mean I'm against the idea of someone doing it. And I guess I still struggle with that, and I've struggled with it for a long time, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that we should kill one. But, in all things science, a body's necessary. That's nothing's going to change that. I don't think even National Geographic quality documentary footage will prove definitively that this creature exists. I think we're going to need something substantial on that. But the IBR, getting back to the main point that you asked, because I go on more tangents than we do on Wikipedia. Kind of, it's just a major umbrella to get people active into Bigfoot research and kind of get a place where we can share information, share reports. It is a report sighting outlet. You can go to bigfootresearch.com and report your sighting. And, kind of like the other Bigfoot research organizations out there, just on a much larger scope, with a board of directors that kind of sets guidance for the group, and a board of advisors that's got folks on there like John Green, Dr. John Mayanzinski, who I got to meet at the Creature Weekend conference. Really interesting guy. He spoke on some things that I didn't think about before, and he was just a really, really all-around great dude. That was a good conference, too, for those folks that missed it. And that's pretty much the IBR.
I wanted to go down for that, but something was going on that weekend. I can't remember. I think it was something to do with... Wait, when was that?
Oh, that was, I think, 2 weeks after the Ohio Bigfoot Conference.
I feel like I was doing something that had Mark involved, but I can't remember what it was.
I think there was an event going on in the library that weekend or something, or another, I don't know. There's so many events. Mark does a lot of Bigfoot events throughout the year besides the Ohio Bigfoot Conference.
Yeah. I don't know how he finds the time.
He's passionate about it. If it's that passionate, you find the time, which, that passion almost disintegrated another passion of mine, which was my wife. So I had to find a way to balance that myself. You can spend a lot of money, a lot of time on the road doing this stuff, man.
Yeah. What was it exactly that kicked this all off for you?
Well, I think I grew up in a family. Well, I did grow up in a family with where we always talked about, the paranormal and strange creatures. And I remember the first book that I remember looking at on Bigfoot wasn't really a Bigfoot book. It was a book called Monsters by Vincent Price, of all things. And that book's probably pretty rare, and I have a copy up in my attic. And reading that about the abominable snowman and the SasWhat. And then there was Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and In Search of, that I caught in syndication, because I wasn't born till 85. So those shows have already, been off the air by the time, first runs were still going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it really started when we were on a trip to my uncle's house in Virginia Beach, and my dad got a book, because I wouldn't shut up, called SasWhat, The Apes Among Us. He just happened to pick it up. And I read that book the entire vacation, and I was hooked. And I've never got to meet John Green, which I guess I should get a jump start on that, because he's not going to be around forever. And but John Green was kind of the guy that really, pumped me and got me excited. His works were the ones that got me excited about this Bigfoot creature. Then fast forward a few years, when I was 16, 17 years old, I got a hold of Eric Altman, and Eric got me involved in research in Pennsylvania, and it kind of went off from there. So John Green.
So John Green, you actually ended up getting to talk to on SasWhat Experience.
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah, right. Twice?
Yeah, I think so, twice.
I think there were two episodes.
It's been so long, but that was like the highlight of my life up to that point. I had kids. I love my kids, but talking to John Green was pretty special to me. And I've never, like I said, I've never gotten to meet him in person, and I'd love to. And he just speaks with such an authority on things. Whether folks agree with him or not, he's a man that's really dedicated a good portion of his life and a good, portion of his, personal finance to the SasWhat mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's funny and maybe frustrating for him that I think the research that John Green and Renee DeHinden and, Patterson and Gimlin and the old guard did, we've not really come any further than where they started. We still hold a lot of their work into high esteem, and I don't think we've done anything better, and someone can try to prove me wrong, but, Patterson Gimlin film to many people is still the holy grail. And a lot of the work that was done in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when John Green went across the country and talked to different researchers, I don't think we've gotten anything better since that time.
So when you're doing all this stuff, like do you do a lot of field work? Do you have time for a lot of field work?
I do, actually. Last year I spent quite a bit of time in the field, and this year, aside from conferences, we haven't done a whole lot. I don't do the cold anymore. I got pneumonia a couple times, and I just don't mess around with the real cold.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Did you
It's nice to
even?
be out there.
Well, do you have any? Like, did you ever have any like really good results with being out in the cold?
I can. In the cold, we've
Mm-hmm.
had some pretty interesting sounds out there, and we've had some pretty interesting things with things thrown at us. But of course, things being thrown doesn't really, say anything. But we've had some pretty good results in an area that had already had activity. If that, so, I'm a kind of a believer. I mean, at this point, I've kind of changed my tune on it. You can go out to any woods and try to act, and try to act out Bigfoot noises and try to get results. But I think it means a little bit more when you're doing it in an area that's had some activity.
Yeah.
And those areas are the areas I kind of stick to now. Maybe not really well known on a map where we can go to a Bigfoot website and say, well, this whole area of Pennsylvania looks good, let's do here. But areas where we've gotten reports from, up in the northern tier of the state, up in the Allegheny National Forest and around those areas, maybe a couple counties over, are really ripe spots, I think, for Bigfoot activity, and nobody goes there. So you and I had talked occasionally off the air,
Yeah.
and in Messenger about certain parts of Pennsylvania seem to be really hot, and I think there are a lot of parts of Pennsylvania that are really hot. It's just you have to remember with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society, like most of the members in that organization, in our organization, are in the southwestern part of the state. In fact, I think 80% of the membership is from the southwestern part of the state. So, with all the events and everything that Eric's done out that way, and just the notoriety that Stan Gordon has got, that reputation he has in that area, a lot of the reports in that area go to them. But nowhere else in the state do we get a lot of reports from unless somebody happens to be out there, specifically searching on Google for, report your Bigfoot sighting. Now that's changed because we have my team of investigators is out here in the northeastern, north central part of the state, and we're getting out there. And the more we get out there, word of mouth is starting to spread that there are people involved in this part of the state that are actively seeking and want to take historical Bigfoot sighting reports. I want them all, mainly because I'm greedy, but I want to look at the data. I want to map it. I want to see if there's any trends we could take a look at and help us deploy more efficiently. And wouldn't that be great if we could plug this all into a thing like, hey, Google Earth? Thank you, Google, for providing all these great services that we tend to take advantage of and abuse, and be able to look at it over time and see, well, maybe in 1996, we might have had a handful of Bigfoot reports, but they all happened in the spring, all during a new moon, and, average temperature at this time, maybe that sounds like it's a good time we should deploy instead of like every Tuesday of the month we'll go out and eat some chicken and have some fun looking for Bigfoot. You could be a little bit more specific with it and, maybe get a lot more evidence. And I think that's the way we're going to start going. So a lot of the research that's been done lately by my group, the Keystone Bigfoot Project, is looking at all the data that we can from every organization. So if I've borrowed your work, you should be credited with it on the website, and I thank you, because it's important that we look at all this. And there are a lot of reports from the PA Bigfoot Society that aren't even put on a database that I need to get to Eric's house so I can take my little scanner and start scanning all that through. Because I want that data. I told you I'm getting greedy. I want it all because I want to look at this and I want to start seeing if there's patterns. Or maybe there's no patterns and we're all just nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, but we just have to look at something and try to be smarter about what we're doing, because you can drop in a lot of money. Let's look at finances, okay? Why hasn't Bigfoot been discovered? One, we don't have a scientific organization backing us, okay? There's no National Geographic is not paying us, $2 million to go out and look for Bigfoot. Gas is damn near $4 a gallon. And for me to get anywhere where there's some activity, I either got to go 35 miles north of my house or like 200 miles to my west to areas where there's Bigfoot sightings. So if you guys want to start funding my research, I'll come out there and I'll do it all the time. But that's not counting camping costs, equipment costs. The average Bigfoot researcher, is operating on a limited income for expenditures. Most of us have mortgages. Most of us have bills. that come first. I have kids. They have teeth and they have eyes that need taken care of. So, my Bigfoot surplus budget isn't exactly a surplus anymore. I have to start being smarter about it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks are feeling that crunch. So we don't have that independent third party, funding us endlessly with money to do this research. So we got to do with what we got. And I got to start being a lot smarter about it. And I think Bigfooters in general need to be a lot smarter about it. How are we going to, what's the future of this research going to look like? Are we going to jump out in the woods and start beating trees and screaming like a bunch of half-ass idiots? Or are we going to start looking at data, start communicating with each other, and start finding a better way to do it? And that's, where I've been wrapping my head around the last couple of years, because I kind of went silent, Seth, for a while. I kind of just went dark. I didn't really want to have a lot to do with it anymore because the personalities were starting to get to me, and I was always a pretty strong personality. Privately, I was threatened by an individual who I won't name because that'll just add fuel to the fire, who was not a fan of mine. And
I want to know. I'm gonna have to know.
We'll talk about it off air.
Okay, great.
I just, but it was kind of uncomfortable for a little bit, and life got in the way. I had a third kid, and I needed to start, allocating, time to some things that were more important at the time, and still more important. Nothing takes precedence over the kids, and so that's where we're kind of at with that. So I'm ready to jump back into this with both feet. I've been ready. My team is ready. They've been deployed. We've been working on some active cases, and we're just ready to go to kick some arse and take some names and start looking at some data so we can start getting some results.
Okay, so moving away from that, what was it that when did SasWhat Experience start up?
Oh, I think 06.
Okay, 06. So you were, I would say podcasting came into its own in like 04, 05. There was podcasting going on before that, but I don't think that people were as aware of it. And honestly, even in 06 when you were starting up, it was not. You started on Blog Talk. Mm-hmm. What was it? First of all, actually, tell any of our listeners what exactly SasWhat Experience was.
Well, SasWhat Experience was a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly kind of talk podcast radio program where we just discussed Bigfoot, talked about Bigfoot personalities, and interviewed those in the field, past, present, to get their opinions on current events and what they've been doing, kind of a check-in show. And I did that with Henry May for a long time, and I went back and forth on that a little bit. We had a lot of different co-hosts and tried to make it fun and entertaining. Some folks didn't care for it too much. Other folks loved it. It's what you have with anything. I always kind of enjoyed doing it because it was fun. You got to talk to researchers, and it became kind of an outlet for us to become connected to one another a little closer. So Steve Coles, I think, I'm going to go to the lineage on this. I think Artist First, Bigfoot Central was the first talk program on Bigfoot, podcast, kind of live stream on Bigfoot. Then I believe it was Steve Coles with the Squatch Detective. Then SasWhat Experience came along, and at the time on Blog Talk, it was just Steve Coles and myself doing Bigfoot podcasting. And then Billy Willard came on with Sasquatch Watch. Pardon me. And keep in mind, these are gentlemen I've become friends with, while we were doing the shows, and we became a network for one another. We shared guests a lot. Billy Willard's sons, actually, were in the field today. They had their sighting and called me. I was their first phone call. They were still in the field when they had their Bigfoot sighting. It was really an honor and a privilege to share that with them and be able to kind of help talk them through it and to get into a good frame of mind. And we became closer as friends through all that. And then Bob Coyne and Mike Killen, Mean Mike Killen and Kick-Ass Bob Coyne from Bigfoot Quest. That was a really good show, and that's kind of ended too. So when you go back to those shows that started, there aren't too many people, still aren't too many shows going on. I know Steve Coles is still kicking, doing his program, and Billy Willard was off for a while, and he came back, and Bob Coyne and them are gone now. But there's been so many that have popped up after that. But really, when you start talking about the first shows, it was Steve Coles and myself that really started kicking off these Bigfoot podcasts.
Yeah, you had something, too, that set you apart in that you almost had your own little network going on where I don't think You talked on a few episodes, because I've gone back and listened to all that stuff because I work a cubicle job, so I pretty much just listen to podcasts for my day. You talked a couple times about shows you were going to start and you never actually got them started. So I think you had ideas for things you wanted to do with like turning it into a full-fledged network, but you at least had the Don Keating show, the Sasquatch Triangle on there, and so you were actually doing something that was a little ahead of its time, especially in 2006, because you basically had formed almost like a little blog talk network where you had multiple shows under your banner.
Yeah, we did. We had Sasquatch Experience, then we did Sasquatch Experience Light, which was kind of 30-minute recap and preview show of the coming week. Then we had Let's Talk Bigfoot for a few episodes, and then we had Sasquatch Triangle with Don Keating before Don branched off on his own, because it became a lot to manage, and Henry May was really heavy-handedly involved in a lot of those programs. And, again, folks grow, and as they grow, they need to, kind of develop their own feet, get their own feel, and kind of test the waters for themselves. Some of them were successful, others were not. And then, it was kind of blog talk radio, and then everybody heard about this talk shoe and wanted to do this talk shoe, and then Live 365 and all this. We could go all day long on these different outlets to broadcast. But Blog Talk Radio, I think, is still the most popular one because it is easy to use. And, not everybody has a technical expertise to do it. Believe it or not, my background isn't the technical expertise. It's I always thought I brought a little personality to the programs and was able to host efficiently, and that always worked well for us. We just never had that technical backbone. Henry May, I love him to death, but he's no technical engineer.
Yeah.
So, he's no engineer. And I love Henry. I drove him to the airport after the Ohio Bigfoot conference, and
Henry's involved in everything, and in
he's
listening,
the Ed McMahon of Bigfoot Radio.
It is. It's crazy. Like when you listen back through these blog talk shows, he's involved in like everyone, and if he's not there, they're talking about him. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, Henry's made himself a mainstay, but he's got a passion for it, and this is. His full-time occupation. He doesn't, this is what he does.
Yeah.
And he's very, very active in it. And, again, another folk, he can be polarizing. I used to call him Flip-Flop May a lot because he did flip-flop on some issues. And, we would argue about it on the show. But Henry was always a mainstay and was just a wealth of knowledge. He really is. He has that memory where he can take you back to give you the exact dates of the Patterson film and the exact dates a footprint was found here, and give you the list of characters and names and everybody that was involved in different, episodes of Sasquatch history. And it's just amazing to be able to have that resource. It was a challenge sometimes to direct that because he went off on his tangents, or he'd yell at somebody or spill ramen noodles on his lap, which,
that's a beautiful moment.
I still get great kicks out of that and still use it to my advantage a lot of times. It was a great moment. I mean, inadvertently and, painful for Henry, but it was entertainment. And I think still to this day, infotainment sells, and people need a little laughter with their edumacation.
So, future research and possible podcasting, what do you got going on?
Well, I'm working a little bit on the Fork cast right now, which is a pre-recorded, just kind of variety ditty I'm doing with some of my friends. We'll be coming along and talking about whatever happens to be on our mind, not really crypto related. I'd like to do Sasquatch Experience again. I think it's time that I returned and took my place at the helm and start. You can only complain about things for so long. And if you're not going to be active in it, you're not going to try to change the course of where things are going, then you don't have the right to complain about it. And things need to change. And I've never been one for sitting on the sidelines, and I like to get my hands dirty. I like to be involved. And I don't know any of these new people anymore. That's what bothers me. I was walking through the Ohio Bigfoot conference, and some lady's like, here's a postcard. You can have the speaker sign this. And I want to say, do you know who I am? I'm Sean Forker, damn it. people don't recognize you anymore. Not that it's ever been about that, but to be part of a field that you love so much, you gotta stand out and you gotta make your voice heard, especially if you're as passionate as I am about restoring legitimacy to what we're doing. Good or bad, when you talk about the guys from the old Texas Bigfoot Research Organization, now it's North American Wood Ape Conservancy. They're real serious about what they do, and that's commendable. And we need more organizations to be serious and to take a stand and to really focus on what they want to do and do it.
All right, Sean, you're on Twitter, right?
I am Twitter at Sean Forker. Everything I do is my name. If I put my name on it, kind of like you do. If stand behind what you say. If you say it wrong, apologize later. At Sean Forker.
At Sean Forker on Twitter, and tune in next week for another episode.
Woohoo!
Okay. All right, we're just going to go right into the next one.
Excellent.
This is SasWhat. I'm your host. My name is Seth Breedlove. I'm joined once again by my pal, Sean Forker, or you may know him as the Fork Chop, which is one of my favorite nicknames for anyone ever.
James Baker wants a quarter for every time someone says that. But,
yeah.
He kind of coined that at a meeting. He and I used to work together. And he used to come up with all kinds of nicknames for me. And the Fork Chop was the one that he said, and that's the one that stuck. And it was different, and it is marketable. And you can go to my website, theforkchop.net, and support it.
There you go. Sean is, if you haven't listened to the last episode, I highly suggest everyone go back, listen to the last episode. You're going to get a wealth of knowledge about the Bigfoot community and Sean's place in it. And there is I didn't say this in the last episode, I probably should. There is a debt of gratitude that I owe him for my interest in the subject, because if I had not listened to the Sasquatch Experience, I list Sean right up there with like the NAWAC and Brian Brown and the Bigfoot Show as one of the reasons I got into Bigfoot to begin with. So it's your fault, Sean.
Well, I'm proud of that. I always said if it happens, don't name it after me. But what the hell? Let's do it. I'm proud of that. Anytime we can get somebody hooked on something that is as great as Bigfoot research, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm doing the show. I wanted this to be more of a introduction to the subject for newbies, and I think this episode will be especially exciting for newbies, because what I want to talk about are sightings and stories, and get into that stuff, because that is the part of this subject that people love. They love the scary stories. So, and someone that's been in this as long as you have, I know you have a wealth of knowledge about this stuff. So, now, before we get into other people's stories, do you have one of your own? Do you have a sighting? What's your favorite encounter story that you took part in?
I kind of have two, but one happened and they happened like 6 years apart from one another, which is pretty interesting because I have a thing for even numbers, and it just happened to work out that way. But in 2006, I was on an expedition with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society and Keystone State Forest. And I was out there with a gentleman who's been in the field for a long time. His name is Tim Cassidy. He's not, a well-known name, but he's somebody that I hold in high esteem because he's been pretty faithful with his research. And he and I, we had just finished a day hike. And it was him, myself, and another member of our party. We were walking back to the vehicles. And the other person and I use their name because I haven't talked to him about using their name, so we'll call him the other person. She and I were walking up to get back to the vehicles, and Tim had stayed behind, and he had yelled, "Hey, Sean, come back here and take a look at this." So I run about. He's about 50 feet behind me to catch up, to see what he's doing. And I don't see him on the road, and he's off the road down in this little gully off the side of the road. And I go to step in, he goes, "Watch." And I look down, and, there was some, something had definitely been walking through this path. And there were these large foot impressions in it. I think it was like 15 inches long, like 7.5 inches wide. It's been a long time, and I don't have notes. And so, we just start following them and following them. And there were just tons of them that we followed up until this point where it came to this little plateau. And the weather started getting rough, so we had to head back. But we had marked the spot to come back. I'd marked it with Tootsie Roll wrappers, and it's important for a reason. We felt odd about this place when we were at. We had come back. The weather did get a little rough. We came back with more members a little later and went back to this plateau, and it looked like we had really pissed something off because, there were a lot of, tree limbs broken. And in fact, the only reason we knew we were in the same area was because of the Tootsie Rolls I had marked it with. Now, that could have been wind or whatnot. I don't put a whole lot of credence in what caused the damage, but there was damage done nonetheless. So we're going through this little plateau area, and this little nest-like structure. That looks strange because, well, it shouldn't be there. It didn't look normal, and it just kind of looked out of place. So Tim starts poking around in it, and, we hear this crash in the brush, so we go to follow it. And Tim's hit with this overwhelming sense of euphoria. And, all of a sudden, he just gets hit with, this whatever. And I get hit with this overwhelming sense of fear and nausea, and I literally start getting ready to puke. And Tim and I are just like, what the hell's going on here? And there was this huge crash in the brush. It sounded like a freaking bulldozer was just plowing right through the woods, and fight or flight kicked in, and I chased after it. And at the point people realized I was chasing after something, they're yelling at me to stop, and there's about 10 other guys with guns, following me, yelling at me to stop because I don't know what I'm chasing. And, of course, at that point, you don't know in your mind, I just wanted to see what the heck it was. I was young and stupid, and we never did see what it was. But that sense of what we felt was just so odd, and I've never felt that before, ever. And as we get back out to the clearing, the power line clearing, to walk back to where we parked the cars, a member of the party said they saw a human-like shaped figure standing at the other side of the forest line watching us. So I don't know if that was what I followed. It was really interesting. That experience I had, or I felt that way, really kind of shook me up. I remember calling my wife crying that night because I was like, I don't know what the hell it was. I just don't want to be out here anymore. I want to come home. I didn't. I stayed the course. But that night we had gone up to the Chestnut Ridge, which is one of the most, active areas of Pennsylvania for Bigfoot. And I just wouldn't even leave the road. I just stayed out there and kind of just watched everybody else do their thing because I was kind of shaken up by it. It was my first real experience with something. I didn't even see it. Later on, after I talked to other people and we'd done interviews about it, the thought of infrasound had come up. Maybe I was hit by infrasound. And the symptoms are very, relative to what other folks have experienced and what you would experience if you were hit by infrasound.
Yeah, describe real quick what infrasound is for
So infrasound, for those you who aren't listening, is a form of communication used by large animals to communicate over long distance. It has a better permeation. It's not as obstructed by trees, and it just kind of does its thing and gets to where it needs to get. Elephants use it. Apparently tigers use it to stun their prey. And it's thought that the Bigfoot creatures use this as a way to get away and not be detected, or just to use it for its own practical purposes, maybe stun their prey.
Mm-hmm.
But the government has experimented in infrasonic weapons and use it as a non-lethal form of crowd control. So it is a real thing. Just whether these creatures use it or not is yet to be determined. But in order for these creatures to communicate over large distances, it makes sense that they would use something like infrasound to communicate.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it does have the side effect of making people nauseous, uncomfortable, and can drive you out of your skin if you're exposed to it long enough. So we thought perhaps maybe that's something we experienced. And the fact that, Tim experienced something very different, he always kind of relates it to maybe we experienced something more hormonal, or pheromonal released. I don't know. I'm no biologist. All I know is it freaked me out. And it was one of the more scary things in my life that happened until the end of September of 2012. We were camping out in Clearfield. And we had done some previous work out in Clearfield and had some activity going on in this area. It's a meadow. It's off the beaten trail. You can see it on a map, but I'm not going to tell anybody where it's at because it is an active, ongoing research area. It's just private. Now, I'm not a snob. I'm just not going to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take you there, but I won't tell you. And we had set up camp. We're out there with members of the PA Bigfoot Society, and it was a quiet night. And Dustin and I, one of my research partners, he and I were building our fire, and we had sat it up, and we're sitting there, and it's just getting right to be at dusk, and it's just starting to turn dark. And I saw something through the smoke kind of walk through our campsite quickly and into the woods. I'm like, I did a double take. I'm like, what the hell did I just see? And I looked at Dustin, and Dustin's looking right at me, and he looks at me and goes, did you see that? I said, yeah, I saw it. So we run to the edge of the woods, and we were trying to look in, and we can't see anything because it has gotten dark in the forest at that point. I'm like, I don't know what the hell that was. That was weird. And it was like a tall, lanky-ish, not lanky, like a nerd lanky, but lean figure that walked through our campsite. And it was really kind of like a tannish color. We didn't see any kind of facial features or anything for it, but saw this figure. I'm like, wow, that was interesting. What the hell that was? So we're still, kind of doing our thing. We're sitting around for the night, and we'd pack up, put our fire out, go into bed, and about 45 minutes after we're in the tent, we started hearing footfalls around our campsite. We're listening. We're like, okay, well, it's not deer, whatever it is. It's got a bipedal motion on it. Is that a person out here playing around with us? And we keep listening, and I look down at the edge, and the orange on where the campfire was, the campfire is glowing again. Well, we had moved the logs a good 5-6 feet away from the fire, so whatever had started the fire had moved the logs back on, and this coals had to have stirred up. I'm like, well, this is really freaking me out. So Dustin gets dressed and gets out, and he puts his shoes on and gets out and starts looking around, and I get my shoes on and get ready to step out, and he goes, Forker, grab me my gun. He always keeps a gun with him for safety. I get him his gun, and as I step out, he goes, holy shit, look. Off to the side of our campsite, that same figure we saw earlier ran up the hill. So at this point, I'm just like freaked out. Because I was talking to John Kirk about this, and if folks don't know who John Kirk is, he's been a man involved in cryptozoology for a very long time. And the funny thing we talk about is, even though we're out there trying to prove that this creature exists, when you have an experience of your own, why the hell aren't you ever prepared for it? And I don't think anybody could get used to the shock and awe as having experienced something like that. And the rest of the night, I had got so shaken up, I had called a member of the PBS to come back to extract us from that area because I wasn't walking to my vehicle by myself. And I didn't feel comfortable with just a couple of us doing it. And they had come back down and spent some time with us. They're like, yeah, maybe you ought to stay here for the rest of the night. So we did. And lying there, about a couple hours later, same thing. Here comes the footfalls again. I'm like, whatever this is messing with us. So we get out of the tent again. If anybody's out there, you need to come talk to us because you're putting yourself in great jeopardy. The whole 9 yards, trying to intimidate, if it is a person, to get them the hell out of there. And if it's not, maybe keep it around to keep its interest going. Nothing did, happen to show itself again. Go back in and lay down. Footfalls again. This is getting old all night. And then finally daybreak started to hit, and it started to rain. And I knew at that point nothing was going to bother us anymore. So we quick packed everything up, and I ran the 2.5 miles out of there to get back to my car. And I'm not a small guy. I ran, dragging a tote full of our belongings with us, and got the heck out of there because it had startled me so bad to the point I told Eric Altman I was done. I wasn't doing this anymore. I was finished. I didn't want to experience that. And I'm not doing it a lot of, probably giving it a lot of, pop and circumstance that it deserves, but it really bothered me.
Well, you got to think, you're back probably pretty far. Obviously 2 miles from your car. Not only that, but yeah. And what kind of person, you got to understand, like, to be in Pennsylvania back in the woods and be messing with someone, you'd have to be a mental deficient.
Yeah, it's especially in Pennsylvania. We're known for our guns out
here,
and I'm not a gun. I'm not a gun guy. I carry a machete. That's just, I don't trust myself with guns because I'm skittish. And Dustin was in the National Guard. He did some service for us as a country, and I appreciate that. And he keeps his piece on him for safety. At least one of us does, because you don't know if you are going to experience something like a bear or another predator out there, and you should have something to scare it off or protect yourself. or in the backwoods of Pennsylvania, you don't know if you're going to run into somebody from the hills have eyes. So it's a scary place. And this area is in a hotbed of Bigfoot activity. I kind of kicked myself in the butt for being such a pansy when all this was going on, but I don't think I ever expected something like that to happen because I'd never had a sighting before that. Mm-hmm. And that was my first sighting. And the thing I struggled with after that is I always thought people that had sightings and got into Bigfoot were doing themselves a great disservice because they lost some objectivity. They wouldn't be able to keep it. And like everything was going to be Bigfoot related. And I guess maybe I was wrong with that because for me it's maybe more skeptical because, having experienced something that we don't know what it was. I'll say that for a fact. It could have been anything. Mm-hmm. I think I know what it was, and I'm kind of finally comfortable with that. But it kind of shakes you to your principle, the core of your principles, and you have to be a lot more skeptical, I think, and not just of yourself, but of everything you take in because you don't want to be bought into it. You don't because, there are Bigfoot believers. They call themselves the knowers. And then there are people that are actually interested in this for scientific purposes to prove it exists. And seeing is not always believing because I think some people see things and need medication, and some people see things and, maybe make it out to be more than it actually is because that's what they want it to be. That's the uncomfortable part of it for me is I saw something, but did I see it because I wanted to see it, or did I see it because that's what I think it is? And, I question myself constantly over and over and over to the point where I'm finally comfortable thinking I know what I saw, but, I'm my own worst critic, I guess, because I still overanalyze it. And I'm very critical when people come to me with their Bigfoot sightings. One of the biggest things I have a problem with is objectivity when you're an investigator, and you're actually, interviewing a witness. How much more damage are we doing, and how much disservice are we doing to ourselves if we're leading these people and telling them what they saw, and they're telling us what we want to hear? And that's where I guess my research technique has always been different because I've always just let them talk, and if I've had questions, I've asked questions. But I always do it in more of a respectful, skeptical kind of way, not just kind of, well, that's not what you saw, you're full of bullshit, but it's always been more like, well, tell me, describe to me what you observed, without telling them, well, what color was the Bigfoot that you seen, and you and I laugh at that because we're rational people, but there are people that when they're out there investigating, so tell us how tall the Bigfoot was, and did you give the Bigfoot apples, and did it come on knock on your door and ask for garlic, those kind of things. And we do ourselves as a community, and we use that term a lot, community, because we are some weird dysfunctional community with so many different outlets it's hard to keep track, with the paranormal and the habituation people and the telepathic people, and it's so hard to kind of keep it straight, and we wonder why science doesn't take us so seriously. Someone's got to be the voice that stands out of the many voices, and I hope it, for God's sakes, it's somebody that's more eloquent than I am, and a little bit more science, has more of a science background, because I don't want these telepathic Bigfoot people speaking for me. That scares the hell out of me, and I don't think it's going to do us any justice to the scientific aspect of what we're doing. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit, hey, telepathic people, if Bigfoot communicates and we can prove it telepathically, I'm sorry in advance. I was wrong. That's just where it's at. It's just not something I think is happening.
So, outside of your own personal experiences, state of Pennsylvania has a lot of sighting reports, and I know that from my little bit of research just into newspaper articles, especially there in that Chestnut Ridge area. That's one of the conversations you and I were having on Messenger, and I said that I'd been finding articles going back to like the 1800s, just like here in Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
But this is all based in one area there. So do you have anything off the top of your head that you think of whenever you think of PA Bigfoot that's like a great PA Bigfoot story?
Well, just because we talked about the Chestnut Ridge, the first night I went up to the Chestnut Ridge, we had happened to be stopped by some people that lived on the ridge, and they asked what we were doing out that way, because, we were in their home turf, and we felt maybe we did need to explain what we were doing. And the people out there are like, oh, yeah. He goes, we've got all kinds of Bigfoot out here. He goes, we hear them every night. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, you got to be freaking kidding me. You nuts? And he goes, no, we can hear them, scream, at least a couple times a week. And to me, that was really interesting. That these people were so comfortable with these things being there, they didn't even bat an eye to tell us about it. And if you, know the history of the Chestnut Ridge, as somebody that was fresh new, that was really exciting for me to hear. Like, man, I'm here. I'm in the mecca of Bigfoot research in Pennsylvania, the area, the hot spot. And that was really cool. Sam Sherry, who, if you go to the Keystone Bigfoot website, keystonebigfoot.com, one of the pages I have is the legacy of PA research, and there I pay tribute to some of the people that paved the path before us, because I really think it's important that we recognize them for having the balls and the courage to, look into these things when it wasn't cool and it wasn't hip, and people really challenged you and thought you were nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But Sam Sherry did a lot of research out in the Chestnut Ridge, and Bob France, who's not on there, where they've had some interesting sightings. But in the area, one of the more, the neatest reports that stand out to me is from a lady who was out jogging during the day, and there's an area called Gray Station, which is an active railroad, and it has a ton of reports, and it's in the Chestnut Ridge area. And this lady was out jogging and saw a Bigfoot carrying a dead deer over its shoulder, walking alongside the train tracks. And I thought that was one of the coolest sightings I have heard from that area. And there are a lot more. But it's just because, again, I say to you, because that area is so heavily researched, people get those sightings. I have a better sighting that was up from the northwestern part of the state. And from a lady. Her husband is a retired school teacher, and she's a retired nurse, I believe, and it's been a while since I've talked to them. They live in a remote area of Pennsylvania in the Cook's Forest, and she had a sighting at about 2 o'clock one morning. It had just rained, and she had come outside, and she had let her dog out to go tinkle, and she went out to the deck, and the dog stopped and started raising a commotion and ran back to her. And about 50 yards from her back porch, if that, there was she saw a Bigfoot creature going through the little garbage dumpster of hers that she had. And they just stood there looking at each other for about 30 seconds, and then it just walked away from her. Didn't show any aggression or anything. It just kind of walked away from her. She's a 60-some-year-old woman. It frightened her to death, but just listening to her recount her experience and the other things that have happened to her along her life, that's, where she's lived in this area, was really awesome. And, people like that, often, even by my own family, my mom's side of the family, which was never really into this, they like to yank my chain a little bit about it. But because my dad's side of the family is where all the weirdos are at. That's where I come from, I guess, mostly. And, what makes you think Bigfoot's real? My pap's been a hunter, all his life. And, this last road trip he and I took, he talked to me a little bit about it, but he's never put a lot of faith and credence into, I've been hunting for 40 years and I've never seen anything, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, that's okay, Pep. You might not have, but the stories I hear from people that have been hunting for 30, 35, 40 years that see something one day that they can't explain and shakes them to the core enough that they can't go back to these areas, that means something to me. And those are the people I research for, so I can get their stories and maybe help them through a little bit of a hard time that they're having, because to experience something like that is shattering, and kind of puts you in unfamiliar territory. If you've been out there in the woods for 35, 40 years, maybe longer, and you see something you can't explain that doesn't belong there, that's going to make you think, and it's going to make you question, did I just see something? Am I going mental? And it's uncomfortable for a lot of those people that do experience that. It's like Bigfoot research is kind of, part biologist, part psychiatrist, part police officer, and you got to do an awful lot of work when doing this type of field work and this type of study. You wear a lot of different hats. But the people that you do it for, the people that have these sightings, you got to make sure you're doing them a good justice and you have a level head on your shoulders so you're not messing them up more or supplanting information that really isn't there. You got to be sound in what you're doing. But even being the most competent of researchers and having the most, John Kirk still gets questioned why he believes in Bigfoot. John Green still gets the questions every day. I don't know if it exists, but it's not stopping us from having a good time and trying to find out.
Sean Forker, ladies and gentlemen. This has been SasWhat. You can find Sean on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
At Sean Forker.
At Sean Forker. And you can find Sean all over the internet. Go to his website, which is theforkchop.net. Is that right?
Theforkchop.net.
All right. And that does it. We'll be back next week with another episode. Sean, I got to be honest. I'm out of time.
All right.
I don't even have time to talk about Willow Creek, so we don't even have to worry about it.
Well, I could save it for you. It wasn't my favorite.
Yeah, I liked it, but I liked it for the non-horror. I mean, it was not a horror movie. 45, or not even 40. Was it like maybe 20 minutes of the movie was a wannabe horror movie, and the rest of it was like a pseudo-documentary.
Yeah, well, I couldn't stand the lady in the end in her underwear or whatever. It was just weird for me. I didn't understand that.
I didn't get that either, but to be honest, did you like the main characters?
No. I thought the guy was a douchebag, and I wanted to kill him if I was a Bigfoot, and the woman was just annoying.
Yeah.
Like, she was stroking off that Bigfoot statue, and I'm like, does that really have to be in this movie?
Mm-hmm.
Really? It just wasn't my favorite. And it was kind of built up to be, a lot of Bigfooters. Like, Tom Yamron was, like, the best part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm biased because I love Tom. He's a great guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So do I.
But
I only got to talk to him for a couple minutes at the conference, but